I thought I had everything under control. My name is Maria Sanchez, and for 6 years I worked as a housekeeper in the sprawling mansion of Ethan Ward, a man who seemed to have it all: money, power, and a perfect family. At least, that's what I thought before I fell into his world. Ethan was charming in ways that were dangerous for someone like me, someone who saw herself as invisible, just a part of the background. I never intended to catch his eye, never wanted to, but that's what happened. And now, sitting in my small apartment, staring at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands, I realize how much my life is about to change. It had started out innocently enough. I was just doing my job, cleaning the endless corridors of his mansion, making sure everything was spotless for him and his high society wife. The mansion was a fortress, a symbol of their wealth and power, with towering walls that seemed to separate Ethan and his family from the rest of the world. For me, it was just a job, routine, predictable. I didn't belong in their world, and I didn't want to. One night, when I was tidying up his office, everything changed. Ethan walked in, and there was something in the air, something charged. He wasn't the unfriendly, untouchable man I'd grown used to seeing at a distance. He seemed different. Vulnerable, almost.
Maria?
He said softly, catching me off guard. His voice was gentle, yet it held an intensity that made me nervous.
You've been here for years, haven't you? Why does it feel like I hardly know you?
He had never noticed me before, but now he was talking to me. I did not know how to respond or what to say. Every fiber of my being told me to stay silent, to keep my head down and do my job. But I was taken aback by his question. This was Ethan Ward, the powerful, mysterious man who always seemed so far above me. Why would he care about knowing someone like me? I guess because you're busy, Mr. Ward, I replied, forcing a small smile. I'm just part of the furniture. He laughed, a low, quiet laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. His eyes lingered on me, and for the first time I felt seen, not as the maid, but as a woman. And that's when I felt it, a pull, something magnetic that I couldn't explain, couldn't resist. I should have walked away, but I didn't. That was the beginning. The nights that followed were a blur of stolen moments and whispered secrets. Ethan and I slipped into an affair that consumed us both. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. Ethan was married. I was his employee hired to take care of his house. But there was something irresistible about the way he made me feel. When we were together, the world outside his mansion disappeared. For the first time in my life, I felt special and wanted. He would tell me how lonely he was, how trapped he felt in his marriage to his wife, Elizabeth Ward, the woman who seemed to have it all: a picture-perfect life, a husband who adored her, 2 beautiful children, and a reputation in high society. But behind the perfect surface, Ethan said he felt suffocated. He would pour his heart out to me during our late-night meetings, making me believe that I was the only one who understood him.
You're different, Maria.
He would whisper as we lay together in the dim light of his office.
You're not like the others.
I believed him. Foolishly, I let myself fall for him. Each time we met in secret, I told myself it was the last time, that I would put an end to it. But I couldn't. There was a part of me that craved the danger, the thrill of being close to a man like Ethan. I had been close to him, but we had never done anything sexual. This changed one night. That night was no different than the others, or so I thought. The house was quiet, the way it always was after the Wards finished dinner. Mr. Ethan had his usual drink in hand, mixing the amber liquid as he sat in his leather armchair by the fireplace. I moved silently around the room, cleaning up the leftovers of the evening meal, my eyes trained on the task. It was a routine I had perfected: be invisible, be efficient, and leave without a trace. Even though we had a forbidden relationship, I wanted everything to be normal. But that night, something felt different. I could feel Mr. Ethan's gaze on me. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but when I glanced up, I saw him watching me, his eyes lingering on me in a way they never had before. I froze for a second, unsure of how to react, but quickly resumed my work, heart pounding in my chest.
Maria.
He said softly, breaking the silence that hung in the room like a heavy curtain. I looked up, startled, because there was something in his voice that sent a shiver down my spine. His eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held mine for a moment longer than they should have. There was something behind them, something I couldn't quite place, but I felt it in the pit of my stomach. It was wrong, but at the same time, I couldn't look away. Without saying another word, Mr. Ethan stood, downed the rest of his drink, and walked past me toward the grand staircase that led to the upstairs bedrooms. My heart raced as I finished tidying up, my hands trembling slightly. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overthinking a look that probably meant nothing. But then he called for me.
Maria.
His voice echoed down the stairs.
Could you bring me some water?
I thought he had drunk too much wine and wanted to sleep by taking his medicine. That night, Mrs. Ward was out for the evening at some charity event, and the house felt emptier than usual. I was wondering how would Mr. Ethan take care of himself throughout the night. I filled a glass with water and slowly made my way up the stairs, my footsteps soft against the plush carpet. The hallway leading to Mr. Ethan's room seemed longer than usual, each step heavier as I neared the door. When I reached his door, I knocked lightly, my hand trembling slightly as I waited for him to answer. His voice came from the other side, deep and low. I stepped inside, holding the glass in front of me like a shield. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his tie loosened. He looked up at me, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, they were different, darker. There was something behind them that I hadn't seen before. I walked toward him slowly, extending the glass of water. He took it from my hand, but instead of drinking it, he set it down on the nightstand without breaking eye contact. The air between us was thick, charged with something I didn't want to acknowledge but couldn't ignore.
Thank you.
He said, his voice soft, almost tender. His hand brushed mine as he placed the glass down, and I flinched slightly at the contact, but I didn't move away. I should have. I should have left the room immediately, but I didn't. And then, without warning, he stood up and closed the space between us. His touch was soft, but there was a weight to it, an intensity that made my heart race. Mr. Ethan, I began, my voice barely a whisper, but before I could say another word, he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, as though he was testing the boundaries, waiting to see if I would push him away, but I didn't. I stood there, frozen, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. This was wrong. So wrong. But there was a part of me, deep down, a part I had buried, that had always wondered what it would feel like to be seen by someone like him. The kiss deepened, his hands sliding around my waist, pulling me closer to him. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands shaking as I placed them on his chest, intending to push him away. But my fingers betrayed me, gripping the fabric of his shirt instead. His lips moved from mine, going down my neck as he whispered my name, his voice filled with desire. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, and my knees went weak as he pulled me toward the bed. Mr. Ethan, we can't. I managed to choke out, but my voice was lost in the sound of my own breath, shallow and uneven. But he didn't stop. He gently pushed me onto the bed, his hands moving over my body in a way that made my skin tingle. My mind screamed for me to stop him, to push him away, to leave. But my body, betrayed by years of longing, years of being unseen, responded to him in a way that terrified me. In that moment, all the lines blurred, right and wrong, servant and master, loyalty and betrayal. It all disappeared in the haze of his touch, his lips on mine, his hands exploring parts of me I had never imagined he would. The world outside of that room faded away, and all that remained was him, Mr. Ethan Ward, and me. What followed felt like a fever dream, a mix of passion, guilt, and desire that I couldn't untangle. He kissed me deeply, hungrily, as though I was the only thing in the world that mattered at that moment. And I let him have me, body and soul. Mr. Ethan undressed me, planting kisses on every part of my body. And what followed next was something I could never even imagine in my dreams. I had never seen a man being so kind to me, treating me so well and ensuring I was having pleasure in whatever he was doing. But when it was over and the heat of the moment had passed, reality came crashing down. I lay there in the dark, my body trembling, my mind recovering from what had just happened. Mr. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me, silent. The room felt colder now, the air heavy with the weight of what we had done. He didn't say a word as he stood up and buttoned his shirt, his movements deliberate and calm, as though nothing had happened, as though the world outside hadn't shifted on its axis.
Maria,
He said softly, not turning to face me.
this stays between us.
His words hung in the air like a command, one I knew I couldn't disobey. I nodded, though he couldn't see me, my heart heavy with a mix of shame and fear. He left the room without another word, and I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with the consequences of what had just occurred. The weight of it all pressed down on me, suffocating, and I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. That night, I became more than just a maid in the Ward household. I became a secret, a forbidden chapter in the life of a man who could never be mine. And as I lay there in the darkness, I wondered how long I could carry the burden of that secret before it destroyed me. But now, as I sat in my small, dimly lit apartment, staring at the pregnancy test in my hands, I realized how much everything had changed. The weight of the truth pressed down on me, suffocating me. I was pregnant, with his child, and I had no idea what to do. The next morning, I forced myself to get ready for work as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. As I walked through the grand halls of Ethan's mansion, I felt the walls closing in on me. My heart raced with each step, knowing that I was carrying a secret that could destroy everything. I knew I couldn't keep it from him forever. The question was, how would he react? Would he stand by me like he had promised during our stolen moments? Or would he turn his back on me, just like everyone else in his world would? The day passed in a blur of anxious thoughts. As I cleaned the spotless kitchen for the 100th time, my mind raced through every possible scenario, every outcome that could unfold once I told Ethan the truth. But none of those imagined outcomes prepared me for what would happen next. That night, after the house had gone quiet, I found him in his office. He was sitting behind his massive desk, his back turned to me, talking on the phone. His voice was calm and authoritative, the voice of a man used to getting his way. He was discussing a business deal, something I didn't care about. I stood frozen in the doorway, my palms damp with sweat. My throat tightened as I realized what I was about to do. There was no turning back now. When he finally hung up, I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice trembling. "Ethan, we need to talk." He turned around, his expression softening when he saw me. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he would be different. But when I told him the truth, everything changed. "I'm pregnant," I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands trembling at my sides. For a moment, Ethan just stared at me, his face blank with shock. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read: fear, anger, disbelief.
No, this can't happen.
He muttered under his breath. My stomach twisted in knots as I watched him, waiting for him to say something, anything that would make sense of the situation. But when he finally spoke again, his voice was cold, detached. Nothing like the man who had held me so tenderly in the dark.
Maria, this will ruin everything.
He said, his words like ice.
My family, my reputation, everything I've built. It'll all be destroyed if this gets out.
I felt the room spin around me as his words sank in.
You need to leave. I'll pay you, give you whatever you need, but this baby, it can't happen. You can't keep it.
The ground beneath me seemed to fall away. I had hoped, that he might care, that he might take responsibility. But instead, he was offering me money to disappear, to erase the problem as if I meant nothing. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice breaking.
I am.
He replied, his tone sharp, businesslike.
You'll get what you need, but this can't happen, Maria, not like this.
I felt a cold wave of nausea wash over me as I stared at him. The man I thought I knew, the man who had whispered sweet nothings in the dark, was gone. In his place stood someone cold, calculating and willing to sacrifice me for the sake of his carefully constructed life. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I thought you cared about me," I whispered. He flinched, just barely, but his expression didn't change.
Maria, this is about more than just us. This is about my family, my life. You knew what this was.
I left the mansion that night, my heart shattered, my mind spinning. I wandered the streets for hours, aimlessly, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The city around me was alive, bustling with people going about their lives, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to disappear, to take his money and vanish, to forget everything. But another part of me, something deep inside, couldn't. I couldn't erase what was growing inside me. I couldn't erase the life I had created, no matter how much he wanted to pretend it didn't exist. But what was I going to do? I was alone, with no one to turn to, no safety net to catch me if I fell. And the man I had fallen for, the man who had made me feel like I was special, had abandoned me the moment things got complicated. As I walked through the city streets, a sense of resolve began to form within me. I couldn't let him get away with this. I couldn't let him erase this child, just because it was inconvenient for him. I thought about going to Elizabeth, his wife, and telling her everything. I imagined the look on her face, the horror, the betrayal. But something stopped me. I didn't want to be the one to destroy her life. She was as much a victim of Ethan's lies as I was. I decided to leave his mansion forever, being totally numb. I thought this would make things right. I would give birth to my baby, and financial support from Ethan would help me take care of the baby. I decided this to save families and the life of my child. But today, 15 years have passed, and I found myself sitting at the kitchen table in my cramped apartment. The room was quiet, except for the soft scratch of a pencil on paper as my son, Gabriel, worked on his homework. I watched him intently, studying his features. He was so much like Ethan, dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and a strong jaw. But there was a difference. Gabriel had warmth in his eyes, a kindness that Ethan never had. Raising Gabriel on my own had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. I had juggled multiple cleaning jobs, working late nights and early mornings just to make sure we could get by. Each penny was stretched, every moment a balancing act between survival and exhaustion. And through it all, I never once told Gabriel about his father. That part of my life was something I had buried so deeply that I hoped it would never resurface. But as life often does, the past has a way of creeping back up when you least expect it. One evening, as I stood by the sink drying dishes, Gabriel spoke. His voice was soft but carried a weight that made my heart skip a beat.
Mom, can we talk?
I froze, the plate I was holding still damp in my hands. There was something in his tone, hesitant yet determined. I could feel it before he even said another word. The dread I had long buried, that grinding fear of the inevitable stirred inside me. I set the plate down and turned to face him, trying to sound calm, though my pulse quickened. Gabriel walked over to the kitchen table and handed me something. It was a photograph. As soon as my eyes landed on it, my heart plummeted into the pit of my stomach. There, in that faded image, was a younger version of myself and Ethan, smiling at some party I'd long forgotten about. He had this picture taken with me out of empathy, that he also considered me important. a memory that I kept preserved. My hand trembled as I took the picture from Gabriel. I hadn't realized he had found it, let alone kept it.
Who is this?
His voice was steady, but his eyes searched mine for answers. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My past was staring me in the face, pulling me back into a time I had fought so hard to forget. The words were lodged in my throat, too painful to speak, yet I couldn't hide it any longer. "That's your father," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Gabriel's expression was unreadable, but I could sense the storm brewing inside him. He stared at the photo, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was a mixture of confusion and frustration.
Why didn't you ever tell me?
I swallowed hard, my throat dry. How could I explain something so complicated, so painful, in a way that made sense to him? How could I protect him from the heartbreak I had felt all those years ago? "I didn't want you to get hurt," I said softly. "When I told your father that I was pregnant, he wanted nothing to do with us. He fired me and cut us off. I didn't want you to feel unwanted, like you didn't matter." Gabriel's fists clenched at his sides, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and betrayal.
So, he just ignored us? Pretended we didn't exist?
I nodded, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I tried to reach out to him, but he never responded. Gabriel stood abruptly, pacing the small space between the kitchen table and the counter. His movements were agitated, restless. I had never expected him to be so mature at just 15 years of age. He was searching for something to hold on to, a way to make sense of the unfairness of it all.
That's not fair, Mom.
He said, his voice rising with each word.
He can't just get away with that. He should be responsible.
I sat back down, feeling the weight of the years pressing on my shoulders. Ethan had controlled so much of our lives from a distance, even though he wasn't physically present. His absence was a shadow that loomed over us, one I had tried to shield Gabriel from. "I didn't want you to feel like you needed him," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "I wanted you to know that you were enough, that we were enough."
But I do need him.
Gabriel's outburst echoed through the kitchen, his voice breaking with a mixture of anger and sadness.
I need to know who he is. He can't just pretend we don't exist.
I looked up at my son, seeing the fire in his eyes. He was no longer the little boy I had worked so hard to protect. He was a young man, and he deserved answers. He deserved the truth. The silence stretched between us, thick with unresolved tension. I could feel Gabriel's pain, his frustration. And for the first time in years, I realized that this was no longer just my burden to carry. It was his too. And together, we would have to face it. The next morning, I sat in a cold, sterile lawyer's office. The room smelled faintly of old books and coffee, the kind of place where people came to seek justice, or at the very least, some kind of closure. Across from me sat Linda Parks, a sharp-eyed attorney known for going after powerful men like Ethan. Her reputation preceded her, and I had chosen her because I knew she wouldn't back down, no matter how tough the fight was. Linda sat with her fingers steepled in front of her, listening intently as I told her the story I had kept locked away for so long. Every word felt like a wound reopening, each detail a reminder of the pain and rejection I had endured. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully.
"We'll file a lawsuit,"
she said, her voice calm but firm.
"Child support and wrongful termination. He won't be able to ignore this."
Her words hit me like a tidal wave. A lawsuit? It seemed so final, so real. My hands fidgeted in my lap as doubt crept in. Ethan was powerful and well-connected. What chance did I, a cleaning woman, have against someone like him? "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted, my voice shaky. He's not the kind of man who likes to lose." Linda didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her gaze locking onto mine.
"You're not just doing this for yourself,"
she said softly.
"You're doing it for Gabriel. And if you're scared, that's okay. but you can't let him get away with abandoning his own child. It's time he takes responsibility.
Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't just some woman who had been discarded and forgotten. I was a mother, fighting for my son's right to know where he came from, to claim the part of his life that had been denied to him. As I left the lawyer's office, the streets outside buzzed with life. People hurried past, unaware of the battle I was about to start. But I wasn't scared anymore. Not for me, at least. I was scared for Gabriel. What would this mean for him? How would this change our lives? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I couldn't let fear hold me back. Days passed, and then weeks. The lawsuit was filed, and the wheels of justice began to turn, slowly but surely. Gabriel was restless, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. He had always been quiet, but this situation had lit a fire in him, one that couldn't be easily extinguished. One evening, as we sat together at the kitchen table, I noticed the way he clenched his fists, his jaw tight with frustration. He was only 15, and he could not hide the anger growing in him.
I want to meet him,
Gabriel said suddenly, breaking the silence. I looked up from the bills I was sorting, startled by the determination in his voice. Gabriel?
I need to see him, Mom. I need to know who he is, face to face.
My heart twisted at the thought. Ethan wasn't the man Gabriel imagined him to be. He was cold, calculating, and selfish. He had walked away from us without a second thought, but I couldn't protect Gabriel from the truth any longer. He had a right to see for himself. Okay, I said softly, the word feeling heavy on my tongue. But you need to be prepared. He's not the man you think he is. Gabriel's eyes softened, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Just a small, tentative smile, but it was enough to break the tension that had been building between us.
I know, Mom,
He said quietly.
but I still need to see him.
The encounter was inevitable now, like a storm slowly rolling in on the horizon. Weeks passed like a slow-moving storm, the kind that hangs heavy in the air, waiting to break. The lawsuit had been filed, and I could sense the tension growing before it even hit the public eye. I had anticipated backlash, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly the media latched onto the story. It started as a whisper, a rumor in business circles, a fleeting headline on a second-rate news site. But then, it exploded. Ethan Ward, the wealthy, untouchable businessman with a sterling reputation, was being sued by a former maid for child support. The scandal spread like wildfire, igniting curiosity and outrage. Reporters swarmed our apartment building, cameras flashing, their relentless questions filling the air. At first, I thought we could ignore it. I figured if I just stayed inside, if we kept to ourselves, the attention would fade. But the media's hunger was insatiable. They wanted a story, and they weren't leaving until they got one. I could feel their eyes on us, watching and waiting for me to falter, for Gabriel to crack. But my son, my rock, remained steady.
There are vultures.
Gabriel said one evening, standing at the window, watching the reporters with a disgusted look on his face.
They just want to pick at the pieces of our lives.
I couldn't argue with him. Every knock at the door, every flash of a camera, felt like another invasion. I hated it, but I hated even more what it was doing to Gabriel. He tried to pretend it didn't bother him, but I could see the strain. At school, his classmates whispered behind his back and sometimes even to his face. "What's it like to have Ethan Ward as your dad?" They would taunt. "Bet you're just after his money." It broke my heart to see Gabriel endure it, but his determination never weakened. One night, as the weight of it all threatened to crush me, Gabriel sat beside me at the kitchen table. His voice was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes.
We're doing the right thing. He has to face the truth.
I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. He was right, but that didn't make it any easier. The day of the court hearing arrived and my stomach churned with nerves. As Gabriel and I walked into the courthouse, I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. The reporters were still there, their cameras following our every step, but I forced myself to block them out. Inside, the courtroom was cold and sterile, the kind of place where people's lives were dissected and judged by strangers. I spotted Ethan immediately. He sat with his lawyer, his face impassive, as though this was just another business deal to be managed. He looked exactly the way I remembered: tall, confident, and entirely unbothered. There wasn't a trace of guilt or remorse on his face. He had always been able to wear a mask to hide his true self behind a surface of charm and power. But I knew better. I had seen the man behind the mask, and now the world would too. His lawyer wasted no time launching into an attack. They painted me as a liar, a woman desperate for money, willing to drag a man like Ethan Ward through the mud to make a quick buck. Every word felt like a punch to the gut, but I kept my head high. I had expected this. I had prepared for it. The courtroom was silent as the lawyer rattled off accusations, but all I could hear was the steady thump of my heartbeat. My pulse raced, my breath shallow, but I didn't flinch. I had nothing to hide. I had told the truth, and that was all that mattered. And then it was Gabriel's turn to take the stand. He rose up, and when Ethan saw him, he could not believe his eyes. He was shocked and ashamed now. His son, whom he had deserted, was standing to confront him and ask for his right. My lovely son Gabriel looked so small sitting up there, dwarfed by the size of the courtroom, but there was a strength in his posture, a quiet dignity that filled me with pride. He glanced at me once, his eyes full of determination, before turning to face the judge.
I grew up without a father.
Gabriel began, his voice steady but filled with a weight that no child should ever have to bear.
I spent years wondering why, wondering what was wrong with me, that he didn't want to be in my life.
His words hung in the air, thick with emotion. I saw Ethan shift in his seat, the first sign of discomfort I had seen from him all day. Gabriel's words were cutting through the mask Ethan had built, exposing the truth for everyone to see.
It's not about money.
Gabriel continued, his voice gaining strength.
It's about what's right. I didn't ask to be born, but I deserve to know where I came from. I deserve to have a father who takes responsibility.
The silence in the courtroom was deafening. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. My heart ached for Gabriel, for the years of pain he had carried in silence. But now, in this moment, he was stronger than ever. He was standing up for himself, for the life he deserved. When Gabriel finished speaking, I saw something flicker in Ethan's eyes. Was it regret? Guilt? It was hard to say. But for the first time, I saw a crack in his calm, collected mask. The court proceedings continued for weeks, and the court's verdict day came. I sat beside Gabriel, gripping his hand as we waited. The courtroom was still, the tension so thick you could feel it in the air. And then, finally, the judge spoke.
I hereby order Ethan Ward to pay child support, retroactively and moving forward. Every child has the right to know about his father and get support. Mr. Ethan is the father of Gabriel, and nothing can change this truth.
A weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying lifted from my shoulders. The judge's words were like an ointment to the years of hurt and struggle we had endured. But more than the money, it was the proof. The acknowledgement that we existed, that Gabriel had a right to his father's recognition. Ethan didn't move. He sat there, stone-faced, his lawyer whispering hurriedly in his ear. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Ethan Ward could no longer hide behind his wealth and power. He couldn't pretend that Gabriel didn't exist. As we walked out of the courtroom, the media frenzy erupted again. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but this time it felt different. This time, I wasn't afraid. I didn't need to hide anymore. Gabriel was quiet as we made our way through the crowd, but I could see the relief in his eyes. The burden he had carried for so long had finally been lifted. As we reached the steps of the courthouse, he turned to me, his face softening into a smile.
We did it, Mom.
He said, his voice quiet but filled with a sense of peace I hadn't heard from him in years.
We finally did it.
I smiled back, my heart swelling with pride. Yes, we did. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt free. Free from the shadows of the past, free from the weight of secrets and lies. And as we walked away from the courthouse, the future felt wide open, full of possibilities. We had fought for the truth and we had won. But more than that, we had found something even more precious: our own strength, our own resilience. We were no longer defined by Ethan Ward's rejection. We were free to write our own story. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.